There was a woman in Oregon named Lisa who had a cat named Monty. Completely ordinary house cat. Monty was 7 years old, neutered indoor Nelly. Never showed any particular intelligence or quirks. One Tuesday afternoon, Lisa was sitting at her kitchen table when Monty did something he'd never done before. He jumped onto her lap and started pawing at her left breast. Not kneading. Pawing. Insistently. Over and over at the exact same spot. Lisa pushed him off. He jumped back up. Same spot. Same insistent pawing. This went on for 3 days. On the 4th day, Lisa felt the spot Monty kept touching. There was a lump, a small one, barely noticeable. She went to her doctor, stage 1 breast cancer. Caught early enough that treatment was straightforward. The oncologist told her that if she'd waited another 6 months, the prognosis would have been very different. Monty had no medical training. He'd never been taught to detect cancer. He was just a cat. But somehow, he knew something about Lisa's body that she didn't. And he's not the only one. Walk into any veterinary behaviorist's office and ask them about this, and they'll tell you the same thing. Pets don't just observe us. They read us. And not in the way we think they do. We like to believe our pets know us because they recognize our routines. They know when it's dinner. They know the sound of our car in the driveway. They know we're about to take them for a walk when we pick up the leash. That's pattern recognition. That's Pavlovian conditioning. What we're talking about is different. Your pet is monitoring biological signals you can't consciously access. Heart rate variability, breathing patterns, micro-expressions in your face, pheromones in your sweat, the electrical activity of your nervous system. They're reading your body like a diagnostic machine you didn't know was running. And here's the uncomfortable part. They often know what you're about to feel before you do. In 2019, researchers at Queen's University in Belfast ran an experiment. They trained dogs to detect the scent of stress in human sweat, not anxiety someone was already aware of. Pre-symptomatic stress, the kind your body produces before you consciously realize you're becoming anxious. The dogs could identify it with 93.8% accuracy. They weren't detecting what the person felt. They were detecting what the person's body knew was coming. Think about what that means for a moment. Your dog isn't reacting to your mood. Your dog is reacting to the biological cascade that creates your mood, sometimes minutes before you experience it yourself. They're living slightly ahead of your conscious experience, watching the storm clouds gather before you notice the sky has changed. It goes deeper than stress. There's a documented case from 2006 of a diabetic man in the UK whose dog would bark and refuse to let him leave the house on specific mornings. Not every morning. Just certain ones. The man started testing his blood sugar on those mornings. Every single time, his glucose levels were dangerously low. Levels he couldn't feel yet. Levels that would have caused him to pass out behind the wheel if he'd gotten in his car. The dog was detecting hypoglycemia through scent before the man's brain registered the symptoms. Medical alert dogs are now trained to do this professionally. But this dog had no training. He just noticed, and he cared enough to do something about it. Cats do it too, though they're less likely to make a fuss about it. In 2010, researchers documented a shelter cat named Oscar who lived in a nursing home in Rhode Island. Oscar would curl up next to patients in their final hours. Not sometimes. Every single time. The staff started using Oscar as an informal indicator. When Oscar settled onto someone's bed and refused to leave, they'd call the family. Oscar wasn't guessing. He was detecting metabolic changes that occur in the body as it begins to shut down. Changes too subtle for medical equipment to catch at that stage, but not too subtle for a cat's olfactory system. He attended over 100 deaths with near-perfect accuracy. Here's the question that keeps coming up in the research. Why do they care? From a pure evolutionary standpoint, there's no obvious reason a house cat should alert you to cancer. You're not part of its hunting pack. You're not its offspring. In the wild, a cat has no evolutionary incentive to monitor the health of a much larger animal that feeds it, and yet they do. Dogs, you could argue, have been bred for 30,000 years to be attuned to human emotional states. Their survival depended on reading us. Fair enough. But cats domesticated themselves. They chose to live near humans because we had mice. The relationship was transactional. And still, there are hundreds of documented cases of cats alerting their owners to medical conditions, oncoming seizures, dangerous drops in blood sugar. Parrots, too. There are cases of parrots repeatedly screaming at specific parts of their owner's body that later turned out to be melanomas. No training, no reward structure, who's noticing, and then trying to communicate it. The most unsettling part isn't that they can detect these things. It's how specific their knowledge is. There's a woman in Canada whose dog started sleeping with his head on her stomach every night. Just her stomach. He'd never done that before. She ignored it for weeks. When she finally went to the doctor, she was 8 weeks pregnant. She hadn't taken a test yet. She had no symptoms. The dog knew before she did. He was likely detecting the hormonal changes, the shift in her scent profile, maybe even the change in her resting heart rate, information her own brain hadn't consciously processed yet, but her dog had been monitoring for weeks. Your pet is keeping a running biological file on you. They know your baseline. They know when something deviates, and depending on the animal, they may or may not tell you about it. Scientists are still trying to understand the mechanism fully. The leading theory involves the vomeronasal organ, a sensory structure in many animals that detects pheromones and chemical signals invisible to us. It's sometimes called the sixth sense organ, though that undersells it. In humans, it's vestigial, barely functional. In dogs and cats, it's wired directly into the limbic system, the part of the brain that processes emotion, memory, and threat detection. Which means when your dog smells your stress, they're not just noticing it. They're feeling something in response. It's not abstract information. It's visceral. That's why your dog gets anxious when you're anxious, even if you're sitting perfectly still. That's why your cat starts acting strange days before you get sick. They're not psychic. They're just paying attention to parts of you that you've learned to ignore. Every day, millions of people share their homes with animals that are quietly running diagnostics on their bodies, monitoring, cataloging, noticing deviations. Most of the time, we have no idea it's happening. We think they're just happy to see us. We think they're just being affectionate. We think they're just following us around because they're bored. Maybe they've detected a cortisol spike, a blood sugar irregularity, a precancerous cell cluster releasing volatile organic compounds. Your body can't smell, but theirs can. And they're trying, in the only way they know how, to tell you. You just have to be paying attention.